We have three presentations in this session. The first one, by Dan Cross, will be on the effect of combining mathematics and science professional development on teachers' mathematical knowledge. The second one, by myself, will be on a selection to the teaching profession in Poland. And the third one, by Anna Zielińska and Katarzyna Brzosko-Barat, will be on the development of teachers' autonomy on the Polish experience in this matter. So, Diane, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. For this panel, we've decided we might actually sit as we speak. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that my colleague Meredith Park-Rogers and I worked on. I'm a mathematics educator at Indiana University, and I focus primarily on the elementary grades, so working with teachers in grades kindergarten through 6th grade. And Meredith does science education for those grades as well. And she didn't have the opportunity to come, so I had the privilege of being here to talk to you guys today. And I apologize, you have to hear me twice. I'm coming back again after you. Not loud enough? My teacher voice. So let me talk a little bit about a project and what we were trying to accomplish, and then I'll talk about how we sought to align our perspectives on mathematics and science education. There we go. So Meredith and I, we teach in our teacher education program. So we work with students, undergraduate students who want to become teachers, elementary teachers, where they're considered to be generalists. They teach all of the core subjects, math, science, English language arts, and social studies. And one of the problems that we also work with in-service teachers, and those are teachers who are already certified to teach, they're in schools, but for whatever reason, they're not accomplishing the outcomes that they want. So their students aren't working or thinking meaningfully or deeply about mathematics or engaging in scientific practices. And so this is a grant that we were funded by the state to work with teachers, in-service teachers, to improve their mathematics and science teaching approaches so that we can see that manifested in the ways that their students were working on math and science problems, particularly on standardized assessments. So we just like to work together, but it's also fruitful because of the content that we work on. And we find that they are, although they're separate disciplines, mathematics and science, there's a lot of overlap in terms of the underpinnings or the philosophical foundations of both disciplines, and especially related to the teaching methods that we recommend and support. In our pre-service teacher program, we actually have a joint field experience for undergraduate students that they do the math and science, what we call a cluster together. So they have methods courses that they do separately. They do the math methods course separately, the science methods course separately. But when they go into the field, as in they go into classrooms to teach, they do that as a combined experience. So some of the things that we thought about in terms of what is similar and how can we approach working with teachers on this project in a way that we're working on science and math, supporting their mathematics and science knowledge for teaching, but in ways that are complementary and that we might yield the best benefit. And so both our disciplines kind of focus on this approach of exploration and investigation of inquiry, of deep learning, making sense of ideas, and then utilizing those ideas to solve problems or explore phenomena. And so we decided that we would leverage that in terms of how we would work at design and professional development as we work with teachers. So our specific goal was to support them in developing their mathematics and science knowledge for teaching. And that particular construct it's specific. It's not just we're working on content, we're working on a range of types of knowledge that we consider to be really important for teachers to teach ambitiously in both mathematics and science. And I'll break that down in a little bit in terms of what are the components of mathematics and science knowledge for teaching. So we drew on Schulman's notion of pedagogical content knowledge and the work of Heather Hale out of Harvard and some of the other researchers at University of Michigan in defining this concept called mathematical knowledge for teaching. Similarly, in science education, ABLE has also constructed a similar construct related to science around teachers' professional knowledge and skills. And the way that the components of knowledge are broken down in both constructs are very similar. They can be aligned, one focusing on math and the other focusing on science. So here are two models. That would be your left, is the mathematical knowledge for teaching, and then on the right, the model of science, teacher professional knowledge and skill. And I'm going to stop here and talk a little bit about the different components of the mathematics, and then I'm going to just point out where it aligns with the science. I have to emphasize, I'm the math arm of this team, not the science. So whilst you can ask me questions related to science, I'll try to articulate a fairly intelligent sounding response, but it could be completely incorrect. So under the umbrella of mathematical knowledge for teaching, there are 6 domains or dimensions. The first one is subject matter knowledge, and that refers to content knowledge that the everyday man would know about mathematics. So if you went through K-12 experience, this is math that you would know. Accountants use this math. Several people in their everyday life and in their jobs, they use this math. It's not specific to teaching, it's just knowledge, mathematical knowledge. And teachers must have this. Then we have specialized content knowledge, and this is mathematical knowledge that is unique to teaching. So it's understanding concepts, for example, understanding how to divide fractions, but not just knowing how to apply the formula, really understanding why the invert and multiply approach or procedure actually works to divide fractions. So it's a little bit more than what someone, an accountant, would need to know or would want to know, but it's integral for a teacher to know that in order to support ambitious instruction. We have knowledge of content and students, and that's related to, that's the kind of knowledge that's at the intersection of content, knowing the mathematical content knowledge, and then also what we know about students thinking and learning and how they develop knowledge and build knowledge around specific ideas. So it incorporates understanding what are common misconceptions that students have, when they tend to make them, and what are some of the ways in which are trajectories around which kids develop strong understandings of mathematical concepts. Knowledge of content and curriculum relates to, again, the intersection of content knowledge and how that shows up in the curriculum. So where would a student normally learn how to multiply whole numbers? Is it usually around about 1st or 2nd grade? Where is it that they would normally learn how to compute fractions in a more conceptual way? Would that be about 4th or 5th grade? To understand kind of the developmental sequence of ideas and where that would kind of show up in the curriculum. Knowledge of content and teaching, that's the knowledge that lies at the intersection of content knowledge again, and how you would use that content knowledge in order to teach effectively so that students would learn. So it involves knowing what are appropriate methods and approaches to supporting kids in teaching fraction or fraction division. I'll just draw that example. What are useful manipulatives? How do you use those manipulatives? How do you actually engage or enact practices that would get kids to think and reason deeply about mathematics? And knowing how to use that flexibly, knowing it conceptually, as if you can talk to me about what that might look like, but then also be able to enact that in practice. So we see where those practices unfold and students are able to learn based on your instruction. These 6 domains of knowledge map really neatly onto, or nicely onto ABLE's science teacher professional knowledge and skill. I would say there's one area in which Meredith and I are still kind of arguing about where does that fit in the science really neatly, and that's the specialized content knowledge. It doesn't seem to really hold, we can't really find strong examples of what that looks like in science education and science teaching, but we're working on it. We're committed to figuring it out. But other than that, the dimensions map on really well. In designing the professional development for teachers, we not only drew on the literature around mathematics and science knowledge for teaching, but we also wanted to design a program drawing on what research has taught us about what are effective ways of organizing professional development. So we drew on the work of Garrett and he did a lot of analyses around professional development approaches and talked about what are some of the things that work. So, and that teachers found meaningful and valuable. So professional development that focuses on content is considered more valuable and leads to more positive student outcomes than professional development that solely focuses on pedagogy. So it's not that you don't talk about teaching and teaching practices, but you also want to make sure that's integrated nicely into the content of what the teachers are teaching. They're also find where there is active learning, meaning that teachers have the opportunity to engage in practical activities, where they can either analyze students' work, where they work on looking at enacting teaching, so things that we call rehearsals, they get to rehearse teaching, or they look at video and they unpack video around students thinking around teaching practice. So it's not just sitting there listening to someone talk about practice, but they're actually doing things that they can take into their classroom or that will directly improve their practice. Fostering coherence was also one that was really important, as in what are the ways in which what they're engaging in professional development actually connects with other activities they're working on, whether in their schools or as a part of the entire program that they're involved in. And how will what they're doing now connect with what's coming on? So that requires some collaboration if the professional development is happening outside of the school context or outside of the district context, that there's communication between the professional developers and the school district so that it coheres as an overall program for supporting professional development for the teachers. Reform activities over traditional activities supported more meaningful engagement from teachers and led to more positive student outcomes. Professional development that was sustained over time. So where teachers would be involved in professional development activities, probably over the course of a year or 2 years, and then there would be sufficient frequency of those activities. So once a month or twice a month over an extended period of time. And where those practices were not only done outside of the teaching context, but it was in parallel. So if they were having workshops outside of class, that there would also be a component where they would get support in the classroom in the form of like coaching or peer coaching or teacher educator coach with teacher or some form of combination activity like that. Collective participation was also thought to be productive, where you weren't just the one teacher from your school who was engaged in this activity, but you either had teachers from who you worked with in your school who were also involved in this, or you had the ability to collaborate with teachers at the same grade level. But just having an experience with others who could understand what you were experiencing in the classroom and could take their own experiences from their classrooms to share and work together was also more valuable than teachers working in isolation. So we took all of what we read about in terms of what supported or boded well for positive professional development and put it all together in designing a program for teachers to work on building this knowledge for teaching around mathematics and science and ambitious teaching practices. So in this table, and I'm just going to go through briefly and use one example to kind of give you just a taste of what we engaged the students in. And I should tell you that this particular professional development program was very time-consuming for the teachers, and it was pretty rigorous. And we were always afraid that they would drop out and not come back. But for the most part, they stayed for that first year at least. So in terms of working on common content knowledge in mathematics, and in science, it was teacher professional knowledge around the content. We had what we referred to as content sessions. And for the math portion, we had what we call morning math. And it actually was in the morning every time we met. And we would work on a problem that was not what we would consider to be novel tasks. So they didn't look like tasks you would see in a textbook. Sometimes they didn't even really look like a math task. It might have been a game that they would play. But then there would be the models that they would create from working through those strategies would be mathematical models that they could reason about and make sense of. And I think they had opportunities to think and to collaborate and to talk through their ideas and solutions with their peers. And it was an example also that we used of modeling what their classroom should look like, that it should be an open space where they could really explore and think and share and build knowledge in this really safe context where they could make mistakes and fail and try again and fail and learn from that entire experience. In addition to building a conception of mathematics outside of what they were used to, which is you get a set of problems, you learn the procedures, you apply the procedures, and you get the answer right. We wanted them to think about mathematics as problem solving while we were building their own concepts of mathematics as well. And then immersing them in an environment where they would have the experience of being problem solvers so they would know what that looked and felt like. And then it would be easier, but not easy, to try to create that for their students as well. And similarly, Meredith, when she worked with the teachers on science, she did the same. They worked on experiments and tried to build their ideas about science through the engagement that they had in those activities. We often did math science activities where we had them work on tasks that were not math or science, but had really rich mathematics and science context integrated, and through working on the activity, then they would build those ideas. So that's kind of how we address this notion of teachers want to focus on content, and content is really important, but also integrating really powerful and rich pedagogical practices that they needed to build as well. So of course, one of the things that we wanted to find out was if we designed this experience for teachers, would they actually improve? Would they improve in the ways that they thought about mathematics and science and what they knew about mathematics and science? Oh, okay. And would they actually improve their teaching? And I'm going to move a little bit more quickly because I am running out of time. So we had two projects. There was one project that I was the sole principal investigator, and all they did was work on mathematics. So, and then there was another project that I worked on with Meredith, and that was math and science. So the ITQ project is math only, the PIMSI project combined math and science. As you can see, the ITQ project had more hours where they spent on math, and the PIMSI project, they had 72 hours on math, 70 hours on science. And so the focus of the study that I'm gonna talk about here today is trying to measure what improvements did we see in math if they had just math, and how did that compare to improvements that we saw in math if the math was integrated with the science. So the data instruments that we used was the Learning Mathematics for Teaching instrument, and it measures both common content knowledge and knowledge of content and students. We did interviews with the teachers, and we also used a mathematical quality of instruction instrument that kind of measured changes in teaching practices. And just to give you an example of what kinds of items that they answered on these measures, this is a released item from the LMT measurement. And if you notice what it looks at is that it's not asking them to actually multiply two-digit numbers, but it's asking them to reason about the validity of 3 students' responses to a two-digit multiplication item. And so this is where the knowledge, specialized content knowledge comes in, where all the teachers could solve this problem, but not all teachers would recognize that which of these methods would be valid for any two-digit number, or recognize whether or not the students' approaches were correct across all 3. This is an item from the MQI instrument, and what you would do with this is take a 8-minute clip from a teacher's instructional video, and then it's a really long instrument where you go through, there are 5 dimensions, and within each dimension there are about 6 or 7 attributes that you're measuring, whether or not they're low or high on those measures. So in terms of the Learning Mathematics for Teaching instrument, we looked at the teachers' scores. There were 15 teachers that we had complete data sets for the math-only PD, and then the combined mathematics and science PD. What we observed was that for common content knowledge, both sets of teachers learned math. So their scores improved, which makes sense. They had a lot of math. But for the knowledge of content and students, only the teachers in the math and science PD improved in their knowledge of content and students. None of these results were statistically significant, but we thought it was interesting to probe further because that was unusual, we thought, that the combined PD would have resulted in that as opposed to just the math-only PD. We then looked at the quality of instruction instrument and what were the changes in that. And overall, for the math-only PD, all the teachers across the PD increased one level on all the attributes. So all of them went up from either a low to a medium or a medium to a high on every single attribute on that scale. However, on average, the ITQ teachers improved on 6 attributes, and then the combined math and science, they improved on 8 attributes per teacher. When we also looked at across the 5 domains of that instrument, 40% of the teachers, as you notice, for 4 of the dimensions, the math science PD, more of the teachers improved on those dimensions than on the math only PD. Again, interesting. So when we looked at the interview results, we wanted to kind of get a sense of, well, why might that happen? When you're thinking about that they get more hours of math in one, why is it that they're improving in their instruction as well as in their knowledge of content and students? And we categorized the interview responses around these 3 core themes. One, the notion that they talked about math and science, this complementarity, that it seemed authentic that math and science would go together. And so they saw it as not an artificial integration of the activities, but it made sense given what we were focusing on in both. That both of them kind of focused on this active engagement, and they both talked about the ways in which math and science together and working on the PD allowed them to make better sense of the ideas that they were talking about, because everything they were actively engaged in, and that it complemented, both disciplines complement each other, work very well. They talked a lot about how the practices that we supported or talked to them about or that engaged in was very similar. And for the math and science educators in the room, it should seem familiar. We talked a lot about critical thinking and reasoning. We engaged them in that. Student-centered instruction, foregrounding student talk over teacher talk, understanding content, and this notion that came up of how important task selection is. That all that we mentioned can only really happen around really meaningful tasks that you select both in mathematics and science. And here are some responses from the interviews. I'll just read one. The first one, I have a better understanding of how to lead and generate questions for my students without providing them too much. I gained the talk strategies and the productive questions and investigation that I can now utilize while lesson planning and conducting. And sometimes when the teachers were responding, although we asked them about, tell me about how you thought about this in math or science, they would respond in very similar ways to both math and science, or they would overlap in responses, and sometimes they had difficulty disentangling how was math different from science. They really saw taking up these practices in very similar ways. So what did we learn? And why do we think that the teachers in the combined PD learned more? I'll just skip to that. We think it's more around the coherence of both disciplines and working around the mathematics and science activities where they complemented each other. So although they got 72 hours of math and they got 70 hours of science, they got more than that in terms of thinking about how to craft good questions, how to engage kids actively in thinking meaningfully about content, how to organize classrooms to support student engagement meaningfully. So they were getting that in math and they were also getting that in science, and so they developed, I think, greater expertise around those practices as opposed to the teachers who were just in the math only, where they were only hearing it just around one particular set of ideas and one particular set of content. So one of the things that we're thinking about is there's a huge push in terms of STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering and math. And just the potential of not only, right now we teach in isolation. A lot of, even though there's a push for STEM, most teacher education programs, most schools are still teaching these subjects in silos. You have math class, you have science class. And when we do PD, similar. We do science PD or we do math PD. But the benefits of combining, if you notice, it's less hours when you combine, but then the benefit is great. And we're thinking that this might be similar for pre-service teachers as well, and even potentially K-12 students when they learn math and science in integrated contexts. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We're a bit late, but I think we'll still find time for one or two questions. Do you have some?
Thanks for that. That was interesting. I'm curious how much you focused on integrating math and science during instruction versus having, the math and the science, and how much you think that maybe the results that you have would imply that that should happen, or is that just a completely different ballgame?
I think, I'd say about a third of the time. So one of the things that Meredith and I were very conscious of was that trying to force the math and science together. And your math, when you think about it in science, it doesn't readily come to mind that every math concept in elementary will seamlessly integrate with a science concept, and so we didn't force it. We really purposely looked through the curriculum and found the ideas that really work well together, and then we planned instruction around those, and that came to about a third of the content that we worked on with the teachers and the activities that we worked with the teachers, and then we just taught math and science separately. That was for the content. For the instructional practices, I would say probably 75 to 80% of it was integrated. Meredith and I just kind of tag teamed through those sessions, and so we saw that come out in interview responses where they just started to talk about instructional practices and didn't always distinguish between math and science because we focused on similar things: meaning making, active learning, questioning, focusing on student talk, and things like that.
Any other questions? Can see. If not, then thank you very much, Dan. So, first, let me to introduce the team, because this work was done in a team, or is being done because it's still work in progress. I work in a small place in the University of Warsaw, an interdisciplinary institute that is a place of work of sociologists, economists, geographers, and some other animals. But this work was done together with people from the Institute of Sociology. Tomasz Zając, who is in this room, and who was responsible for all the things that was done with the data. So if you have some detailed questions about the data, then you'll be the right person to ask. But also Mikołaj Jasiński and Marek Korzykowski, who are not here today. Our motivation was that we academics or experts that talk about and sometimes have some strong statements about the quality of education and changes that need to be made, often forget that there are people between us, between people that claim that something has to be done, and the students and things being done. Actually, these people are teachers. They are the most important people probably in the process. So we forget that this whole big revolutionary ideas about education and how it's going to change have to be understood and have to be implemented by teachers to operate, to work. So it is very important who teachers are. Are they bright, open-minded people, talented, recruited from the best in the fields, or are they not so good? And this is the debate, and this is the thing that is recognized as very important in what's determining the effectiveness and the quality of education. But the problem is that we know very little actually on who are the teachers and what is the selection to the profession. What we are facing are myths on teachers, sometimes driven, sometimes being said by the politicians. So what you have here is there are two headlines from the Polish One is newspaper, the other is internet portal. It was very easy to find for me, like 15 seconds in Google, when I wrote teachers are, there were the two first things that appeared. So the first one, the one on the left, is the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister of Poland, saying the teachers are the elite of the nation. The other one on the right is a citation from a report by the state agency for controlling public institutions that says that the teacher's profession is subject to negative selection. And they are the weakest people, weakest students that become teachers, and they have to do something about this. So this is a very, these views don't go together. I mean, so where is the truth? Because the truth is very important, I think. So we started to think how to check, how to verify the selection to the teacher profession. And we have some beliefs, but no evidence. And also not in Poland, at least no good data from the public statistics. Most studies we have are qualitative. So they are very good. They help to understand the problem. They help to maybe even to find the solutions, but they're not helping to assess the scale of the problem. There is some data from the OECD program PIAC that we know that measures the competences of adults in many countries, not only OECD countries, including teachers. So thanks to this data, we can compare the competencies of teachers in different countries according to some within certain skills like numeracy or literacy or IT. So if you take this data, I'm not sure if the chart is visible for all of you, but the countries are listed from the top to the down, from the best country in terms of teachers' competences in numeracy and then literacy, left numeracy, right literacy, to the worst. So from Finland to Chile in case of numeracy. And the arrows, the red one shows Poland, the blue one shows the United States. So it seems that in both countries we actually have some problem with the selection to the teacher profession. So teachers are not best of the best, to say the least, at least in the case of Poland. There is also one figure that is very small here, so we cannot see. It's the red point on this red points on this graph shows the place of the teacher in the whole distribution of teacher skills, and the number over the bar shows actually the centile of the distribution. So in the case of Poland, the average teacher is on the 38th centile of the adult competences. These are only adults with holding a degree, higher education. So it's important to know. So Poland has the most negative selection to the teacher profession, according to this graph, at least in terms of numeracy, among all countries being tested. 38 is the worst score. Once again, it is 38 compared to the whole distribution, so 38 centile of the distribution list. And literacy, in terms of literacy, it's a bit better, but nothing to be proud of in terms of selection. So this is very worrying. But PIAC shows in terms of selection shows the past and not the current mechanism, because it tests the teachers that are now at schools, that are working in schools at different ages. Some of them started to teach very long ago, so we cannot see the current mechanism, we only see the history, the effect, legacy of the past selection. So what we decided to do is to focus on the data from the University of Warsaw, recent graduates, 2010 to 2017, and to examine this data, asking some questions. The questions were, who among students wants to become a teacher? Which means who completes the course that gives you, certifies you as a teacher within the university structures. Who chooses to study pedagogy? It's a different kind of studies that is, because you may become a teacher in Poland either by study pedagogy, then most of these people works with, having graduated from pedagogy, works with small children in for example, primary school, early years of primary schools. Or you can be teaching some subject like mathematics, physics, literature, and then you graduate from a certain field like mathematics, and then you have complete a special program to be certified as a teacher. So these are two different ways of becoming a teacher, and we examine them separately. And the third question is, does selection to teaching vary across the fields of study? So is selection different among foreign language teachers than Polish language or mathematics or STEM in general? So what we did, we take the data from the University of Warsaw Student Information Admission System, that is called USOS. There's lots of information there, like 90,000 observations, which is, means the student graduated from the program. But most of our estimations are made on subsamples. What we use as dependent variable, so what determines whether somebody decides or wants to be a teacher or not, is a completing a school internship, which is necessary to obtain a teaching license, and it is usually a final stage of the course. So once you get this, you complete this internship, you're soon to be certified as a teacher. So we use it as a, to be clear, we don't know whether these people actually work in school then. What we do is that they wanted to become a teacher because they obtained the license. We are controlling for many things like model level studies, international exchange experience, the awards, economic status, age, gender, high school location. Most of all, what we're most interested in, we control for performance within the program, whatever program the student is in, and the performance at the high school final examination. So with what score they actually come to the university. So we do our analysis in two steps. First, we do some logistic model that explains the decision to become a teacher, using a vector of some student characteristics, which are more or less that what I said in the last slide. And as two main explanatory variables, we use the rank of student calculated based on the high school final examination and based on the performance within the university program. Then, after this step, we calculate what is called the conditional probability of becoming a teacher. So, a probability of becoming a teacher conditional on all the variables included in the model, and we are especially interested in how the performance of students at the high school and performance during studies affect a decision, affect of becoming a teacher. To better explain, roughly explain what are these ranks, what is this measure of student performance, these are, I think the simplest way is to describe it as an average, as a place of a student in a whole distribution of students taking the same exams. So, because we don't use grades, we don't like grades because as you know, if you're a student that who wants to obtain good grades, you can have strategy to get good grades. You can choose to choose the courses, the subjects that are not so competitive, which are easier to get good grades. So we don't like grades. We don't find them very informative. But what we like, what we find informative, it's a position of student based on the grade compared to the students that took the very same examinations, the very same subjects. So the average from the whole program the student went through, the average of such relative grades is considered as a student rank. And we did the very same for the rank in a high school final examination. So we take all the grades from the high school final examination and compare the results of the student with the results of all students at Warsaw University that took the same subjects on the high school final examination. So it is still a place in a distribution, relative grade. I'll be happy to explain it further after, and Tomasz will explain it better because he was the one who actually invented the measure. So, coming to the results. First, the first question is who wants to teach? And we focus on undergraduate programs, including all fields that are at the University of Warsaw. And this line represents the relationship between the student rank, so the rank according to high school performance, which is the blue line, and the rank within the university program, which is the orange one. There's a relation between this performance and the probability of becoming a teacher. So these are the probabilities, the conditional probabilities of becoming a teacher, conditional on student ranks. So we can say that in both cases, in cases of student rank based on high school performance and then based on university performance, the selection is negative. So there is much higher probability of becoming a teacher if you are performing in the lower part of the distribution and then in the higher part of the distribution. Like if your rank is 0.1, the probability is rank in high school, then the probability is around 80% becoming a teacher. If you are ranked something like 0.9, so in the very upper part of the distribution, then the probability drops to like 10%. Okay, so then we try to answer the question, who wants to study pedagogy? This is a different question, and we also need to use the data in a different way because it doesn't make sense to compare students to to use the rank of the performance within studies because we'll be comparing people from the same department of pedagogy. So we only use the rank in high school as a measure here, and you can see that still the relationship is negative. So much higher probability of studying pedagogy if you rank low in the high school final examination than if you rank high. So the first graph was about all students. The second one was limited was explaining the will to study pedagogy. This one answered the question who wants to teach among all fields but pedagogy. So pedagogy is excluded. So these are probably the candidates for teachers teaching different subjects like mathematics, literature, and so on. Still we have negative selection, both in terms of taking into account the performance at high school and performance during studies. The next one is is interesting because it shows how the selection differs across the programs, the fields. So we have because some fields, for some fields, we have only a very small number of students becoming a teacher. Actually, we have to construct some big categories, some very aggregate categories of students. But what we have here is a Polish philology, foreign philologies, and the widely understood STEM. What we can see that there is no negative selection based on student rank within university, so university performance. Among students of Polish philology, so you cannot see the negative selection here, but there is very strong selection in foreign philologies. So weak students are in foreign philologies are much more probable, much more likely to become teachers than strong students. With STEM, there is no visible selection, but here the thing is complicated because it's in some fields like mathematics, we have very few students that actually decide to become teachers. So very difficult to get any statistically significant result. But we suspect that there's strong variety in the selection between the fields within STEM. So, which brings to our minds and which leads us to the conclusion that selection at the university, which we observe, is only a small part of the picture, because of equal importance is selection by the university. So, if you look at this table, you can see that during all these years, like 2009 to 2017, only 77 graduates from mathematics became teachers, or wanted to become teachers. This is a very small number compared to the teachers in Polish or even geography or biology. But teachers with mathematics at schools have to come from somewhere, so they're not graduating from the University of Warsaw. So the obvious next step for us is try to combine data from different universities, different higher education institutions. We hope to do this for these universities that use the same administration information system, which is called USOS, and there's some universities that do that. So that's the next step. Okay, last thing, something optimistic. In this whole sea of negative information. What we observe is an increase of attractiveness of becoming a teacher at the University of Warsaw. And to this, among other fields than pedagogy. So if you look by the year of birth of a student, the probability of becoming a teacher is increasing starting from 1989 as a birth year. At the University of Warsaw, while the probability of studying pedagogy is stable over time. So, conclusions. We think this university admission and information systems are quite a good source for the research, but we recognize that there is a necessity it's necessary to combine data from different universities, although University of Warsaw is the largest Polish university, so there's lots of data. It's also very selective, so we have a problem with not very representative data. When you consider student performance back in high school, I mean, at the end of high school, there is a significant negative selection, both to study pedagogy and to receive teacher training as a student of another program, another field. There is a negative correlation between student performance in the program and decision to become a teacher for graduate students. Selection clearly varies across two fields of studies, and what you can see is particularly strong within foreign philologies. What I already said, the selection at the university is only part of the problem. We need to to get a bigger picture, you need to study the thing across the universities too. And positive information that I said in the end. What we observe is a upward trend in the attractiveness of student training at the University of Warsaw. We are not sure whether it is a consequence of the economic crisis and the increasing demand for a stable job in the public sector, or maybe it is a consequence of the increasing teacher wage, which was the experience of teacher during the last decade. We don't know that, with different data to learn this, but still some positive trends can be observed. Thank you very much. Okay, so now I come back to my chair duties.
Or maybe any questions?
Can you please tell what are approximate effect sizes of these regression curves, like percentage of variance explained?
I don't have tables here in the presentation, so I can, and the percentage of variance explained is not that the measure that I would trust in the case of logistic regression. Well, but if you express it in terms of this conditional probabilities for different for teachers at different points of students at different points of skill distribution, that's the difference between the probability of becoming a teacher.
What's the significance, at least?
But the significance, these are very significant effects. We have lots of observations, so they're all significant at whatever level you want. I mean, it's, but the difference between the weakest students, like in the first decile of the skill distribution, and the strongest students, is about 10 percentage points in the probability of becoming a teacher. So it is quite strong. So it is about 10% point points more likely for weak students than for very strong students.
Any other questions?
Actually, I have a question, so I don't probably don't need a microphone. I was wondering
But
about...
please use one because it's
Okay,
we are recording
okay.
this.
I was wondering about some recommendations that come to your mind based on the research in terms of changing the scene of teacher education, because you seem to differentiate between pedagogical and non-pedagogical teacher training courses, and I was wondering if you could come up with some recommendations.
But I have to explain that there's a difference between the partially, I mean, differentiating between the pedagogy and the other subjects. It partially came from the fact that the organization structure of the education for these types of teachers is very different in Poland. But also I suspected that the results may be different, which was not true actually. But I suspected that there may be strong negative selection among the students studying in fields other than pedagogy, but not so in pedagogy, because there are more people, I know, more devoted to teaching, more driven by real passion, you know, and you can believe that the negative selection may more be the case in the case of students that actually might work in different places, different professions, but for some reason they decide to teach, and maybe the reason is they're not being good enough to do another profession. But this hypothesis was falsified, according to me. So we have negative selection both in the case of pedagogy and non-pedagogy. Recommendations. Well, it is certainly what we have to do, especially in the life what I said first. I mean, whatever we want to change in education goes through teachers. I mean, so we have to change the selection. We have to, and I'm aware it's a very long process. And like everybody looks at Finland. Yes, Finland is known for having very good teachers, and it's known for very positive selection. If you look at the charts I showed here, it's on the top of both graphs. So it's not just, I'm aware it's not just wages. It's part of the culture, it's part of the, it is a prestige, a social status of the teacher that is important, and it will take decades, even if you start now, to change it. So it's very difficult to answer in a simple way to this question.
I have no question, but I would like to give some additional remark. It was, as I remember, 2 weeks ago when I saw in our newspaper, Daily News, Rzeczpospolita maybe, ranking of departments according to attractiveness of salary. And it was 17, as I remember, these professions of our alumni. And unfortunately, pedagogy was on the last position as a recommendation.
Yeah, to rise the...
So yes, of course. It's the same with high schools. We have not the best students who would like to work as researchers because of very low salaries. Unfortunately, I'm very sad because of this.
It's a vicious circle, because if you talk to the politicians, for example, or even experts in the field, they say we have to rise teachers' wage, otherwise we cannot attract better people. This is true. And the others say, look, the teachers are weak. Look at the results. We cannot pay more people that are that weak. But we have to break the circle. I mean, it's we have to both offer teachers better wage and demand more from them. I mean, it's, of course, what is missing in what I'm saying now, and is very important, is the whole process of formation. I mean, between selection and to studying pedagogy or to completing training and paying teacher, being employed as a teacher, is this whole very important process of formation for which the schools of education were formed. And my intuition is, and my knowledge is that the school education at the University of Warsaw was established also for the reason that we recognize that this formation process is also failing. It's not very good in a traditional way.
But now is not the time for selection of teachers.
Yeah, and when it is a good time for that.
And I would like to piggyback on my colleague's question and ask you if you have the data that you could present to convince people, whoever you need to hike teachers' salaries. Because if it is data-driven, then you might be able to collect that kind of data to support teachers.
Yes, there are some data. There are some data on that, and there are very good comparative data, international data on teachers' salaries. The ones published by CT every year are quite informative. And I already tried to do this.
Any other last question, because we have to pass to the presentation? Maybe last one? Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Can we have this presentation? Is it possible to get this presentation?
Yes, I think everything is recorded and it's going to be posted on the website of the conference, I think including the presentation.
Okay,
Thank you for inviting us for this very stimulating discussion. It's a real pleasure to speak to you today. And I'm afraid that we'll have to continue to delve into the scene and landscape of Polish education as we move towards the topic of our presentation, which is the development of teachers' autonomy through the analysis of Polish experiences. Although there is a large body of research regarding autonomy and teacher autonomy specifically in all fields of education, including my own one, which is language and bilingual teacher education, we continuously find this topic important to analyze in the Polish context. Some research confirmed a difference in status of autonomy in personal and professional teachers' experience between the two generations from 1989, 1990 teachers, so that it was just the time of the fall of communism in Poland, and the recent teachers from the recent generation of teachers from 2014 to 2015. The contemporary teachers seem to place less value on autonomy in personal and professional lives. What we know from a large-scale diary and biographical study is that the teachers from Solidarity generation demanded more freedom, self-agency, self-determination to change Polish school to become more democratic. They put much more focus on common good, collaboration, and community values. They declared more interest in developing own concept of teaching, and they were more critical towards bureaucracy. On the other hand, the generation of teachers from 2014 and 2015, they seem to put less value on autonomy, self-agency and freedom, more value, on the other hand, on market and economy-related features. More focus on personal success and individualism, and they are ready to follow the established teaching schemas. They seem also more adjusted to bureaucratic requirements and are not as willing to rebel against them. As I said, there is a large body of research discussing different conceptualizations of autonomy. And for our presentations, we would like to focus on especially the two first ones, which is capacity for self-directed professional action and capacity for self-directed professional development. So what is the aim of our presentation today? The aim is to look at the factors which support or constrain the development of teachers' autonomy on system level, on school levels, and pre-service teacher education level. And we'll try to propose some recommendations regarding developing autonomous teachers on these three levels. At this point, I'm going to move, the floor is all yours. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, I'll also tell you a little bit about the three studies that we're going to talk about. As I said, there will be three studies on three levels, discussing these issues on three levels. The first one will be on the system level. We'll talk about the evaluation of Polish teachers' advancement system. So the basic for how teachers are advancing in their career in the workplace. Study 2 is on trying to discuss the same issue on the level of school. And the focus is on development of professional competencies of young teachers and the differentiation of generation between young and experienced. And the third study is on the level of pre-service teacher education, where I look at the pertinence of action research and collaborative action research projects in pre-service bilingual teacher education.
And now I present the study 1 and study 2. The study one titled Evaluation of Polish Teachers Advancement System. It worth mentioning that the current shape of this advancement system was introduced in 2000. The aims of this system were the following: to improve teacher skills, both subject-related and educational one, to give them new skills, for instance, communication skills or classroom management skills, capacity to teach the pupils with different educational needs. Improving the teacher knowledge, skills and status at school was supposed to develop their activity, self-confidence and autonomy. And this research conducted among 93 principals and 500 teachers. We used various methods of research, quantitative and qualitative, among others, national sample study on randomly chosen schools, and 4 focus groups formed by in-service training teachers. And which we can draw with the, yes, which we ask the question: which competences do teachers develop during advancement process? And we can see the field of improvement. Improving teacher response about half of participants. Coping better with behavioral problems, about 1/5. Improving the cooperation among teachers, a quarter. And we can draw the conclusion that this advancement system doesn't, in fact, evoke expected results and doesn't support teachers' autonomy development. What changes in the teachers' advancement system should be introduced? Bureaucracy reduction. The majority of participants indicates this problem. Increasing freedom for teachers in choosing the advancement path and task, and then the formalization of requirements. The first 3 categories are connected with the development of teachers' autonomy. And now some results from study 2. Development of professional competencies of young teachers. Method focus interviews and the sample in-service teachers, students of postgraduate study, organization and management in education, the future principals of schools, there's a special study for future principals of school principals, and students of early education with pedagogical therapy. What issues were discussed in group, these 4 focus groups? What competencies the young teachers starting their professional career possess in sufficient extent, and what competencies do young teachers lack? Which competencies should teachers receive during academic study and which ones in their workplace? How should they be developed? Which competencies teachers ought to develop following the changes in contemporary school and modern society? And the examined teachers indicate the competencies the young teachers possess in sufficient extent and which they don't. The competencies which teachers lack in the analysis of focus interviews. Communication competencies in relation with pupils, parents, and colleagues. Class management, The very characteristic phrase of participant, monitoring students. They have a problem with monitoring students. Structuring lessons work, ability to evaluate, and it's surprising that some kind of skills the participants of this research did not mention. And it's very characteristic, I think, for the condition and way of thinking of Polish teachers. The ability to cooperate in teachers' teams, solving problems together, community spirit, trust and confidence. Intergenerational collaboration and learning from one another. Recognition of environment needs and diagnosing the given school needs. And cooperation with parents and openness to the needs, because the parents are the problem for teachers. The teachers often defend their own position in relation with parents. And where are the obstacles to professional development of novice teachers? We can conclude that not respecting the rights of novice teachers to look for their own manner to create their professional identity. Generation gap, visible conflict between the novice and experienced teachers, unwillingness to cooperate, contradictory expectation of these two groups, younger and teachers and experienced teachers. No respecting also. Defensive attitudes, not creative, open to challenges. It's a very characteristic phrase. We can be assertive. We can't give up to parents. And lack of awareness of new competencies which are necessary in changing work and new school. And now,
Yes. Okay, I'll take it over here. The third level that we wanted to look at is the teacher education level. And actually, both in the literature, in the international literature, as well in Polish research literature, there is quite a lot of pressure put on teacher education institutions as to how well they prepare authentic, autonomous teachers. And here I would like to point your attention to the second quote, which comes from the renowned Polish the teacher education researcher, Professor Kwiatkowska, who said that this inability to consider alternative solutions has been linked to the lack of autonomous identity, which could be supported by creating opportunities to explore during the process of pre-service education. And as you know, very well know, there is a whole plethora of teacher strategies or teacher education strategies which are supposed to help and support teachers in developing these autonomous identities and autonomous ideas about their professional actions and development. And the main one, of course, is the use of portfolios, enhancing reflective teacher development through systematic inquiry, case studies, analysis, case studies construction, and action research and collaborative action research. That, of course, action research has been mentioned frequently in the American and European literature as a potential tool for analytic problem solving, realizing positive effects on teacher learning and identity, emphasizes the importance of collaboration and inquiry, and it's of course data-driven, so it helps in making decisions regarding their actual practice in the classroom. So the study that was conducted was a study using qualitative methodology. The aim was to investigate into and find alternative practice to classroom problems with the help of AR and collaborative AR, conducted by pre-service teachers and cooperating teachers. The sample was about 40 student teachers in the program. They were at this point in our program, which I will tell you in a second. There were also 10 program graduates, 20 cooperating teachers, and 10 teacher educators. The data collection, we have utilized lesson observation, document analysis, such as AR projects, portfolio entries, interviews with student teachers and program graduates, cooperating teachers, and teacher educators. And I need to mention a little bit about the context of the study, as in 2014 and 2018 we had established a new 2-year MA program in teaching English to young learners and bilingual education. And this program was created with the support of university in Finland, Sweden, and in Slovenia. At this point, we have about 100 students who have been studying in our program. So we had already 4 cohorts. And what is important is that we have a very strong group of cooperating teachers who are selected, and they are being supported not only in the idea of mentoring, but also bilingual teaching. And what I also want to say that our program is constructed with the effort to embrace inquiry-based model of teacher education. When I was listening to the curriculum and the teacher education plan of the School of Education, we are very similar in many aspects of the program itself, except that we are preparing bilingual teachers. So here I also recognize some issues regarding integrated teacher education, as we prepare teachers for integrated context, because we prepare teachers for bilingual education. So we stumble over many the same issues. What I also want to say that student teachers participate in a course, which is an AR course, action research course, and they are supposed to conduct the action research projects during their practica, which are 2-year-long practica, but they spend 1 year in one school and the second year in another school. And what were the findings? Well, not surprisingly, action research did help student teachers in utilizing the variety of sources of teacher knowledge. So that means that really helped them to notice that professional knowledge it does not only come from books and the teacher educators, but also from procedural and personal knowledge. AR really guided them to see a variety of perspectives among teachers and learners, and AR helped them to recognize and analyze the needs of learners and their motivations. So there is not only one type of learner, every student is different, which for pre-service teachers might be sometimes surprising. And AR broadened student teachers' repertoire of teacher professional activities. And that we find extremely important. So they notice that teachers actually not only teach, but they also in reality reflect, collaborate, and they also conduct research. However, we have experienced a lot of challenges when it comes to utilizing AR in our program, because both cooperating teachers and student teachers have very limited perception when they first enter the program. So for them, research is about checking all the available articles, books on the topics, but it's not about researching their own practice. So that is the first problem that we stumble over. Student teachers feel isolated and in a way very much in discomfort when it comes to asking mentor teachers to help with collaborative action research. They think that they don't want to take their time from the important work on their practice. So they don't see action research, as I said, as a research on practice. So action research is also seen as an activity that is, as I said, moving students away from practice. And I'm not sure what you can see here, nothing. But anyway, what I wanted to point out here is that the small values that you see, this was a question from the study, completely different study, from 2018, when we asked bilingual teachers about their preferred ways of support and professional development. And the large numbers they all wanted to participate in courses, in seminars and conferences, and none of the teachers who in fact are then become and are mentor teachers for our programs, almost no one wants to participate in action research. No one wants to participate, I mean, we have very small values here, in a study visit or being mentored by others. So just to give you a nice context of what we are working against sometimes, I thought that might be a meaningful slide. So conclusions, very quickly. Factors connected with educational system as well as in-school factors seem not to support the development of teachers' autonomy. Criteria and rules of advancement systems seem not to depend on teachers' autonomy and self-direction. The novice teachers often lack competences which could support the professional autonomy, lack ability to evaluate their work, lack of communication skills, lack of school support of teacher autonomy visible in school conflicts and generation gaps, and teacher education could provide students with strategies oriented towards autonomy development such as AR or portfolio, and teacher education is limited by the educational system and school of everyday practice.
And now some conclusion formulated on two levels: educational system level, school level, and recommendation for teacher education institutions. Sorry.
We're done.
The recommendation of the educational system level. We will try to formulate this recommendation, and we think that very important is remove bureaucratization and formalization of the teacher professional advancement system, and change the advancement requirements from formal to more school practice oriented, and promote teachers' activities oriented to creative solutions to school problems, and connect the requirements of advancement system with quality of schoolwork. Allow principals more freedom in decision making regarding the advancement decisions, offering more freedom to creative teachers to choose their promotion path and task. Because now it's very strictly organized, all these procedures by executive regulations. Decentralized advancement system, shifting advancement decisions to school by providing more autonomy for schools. And the recommendation on school level. Open schools to novice teachers and their ideas, bridging generation gap. It's of course, it's a very difficult task, but I think there's the direction of our thinking and acting concerning this problem. Change school management from hierarchical to more equal, and from bureaucratic to task-based model. Change peer relations from competition-based to collaboration-based. And establish the support system for teachers in difficult situations, not only didactic but educational and connected with interpersonal problems too. And recommendation for teacher education institutions. Review teacher education programs for strengthening modules and activities which support new teachers' autonomy. Broaden the scope of teacher education beyond initial teacher education to continuous teacher education, in-service teachers education. Strengthening the connection with schools, school administration and local government for encouraging the solution to develop teachers autonomy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I understand your question to my presentation about the recommendations, because you have them all here. Questions are welcome.
I would like to ask about the second study.
I would like to ask about the second study, these focus groups. You said about competences that teachers didn't notice, didn't mention, and I don't understand, did they think that they have this knowledge, or they didn't mention it, and you mentioned, or you just looked at it and said that this maybe it's important? I didn't understand that part.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So they knew that they didn't have it, or?
Yes. The method, used method, it was focus interviews. And we asked some questions. Which competencies the teachers were not, it's not these questions. What competencies the young teachers starting their professional career possess in institution extent, and what competencies the young teachers lack. And our expectation were the following. There are some competencies connected with ability to cooperate in teams, intergenerational collaboration, recognition of environment needs. They are very strongly connected with our requirements of our advancement system. And our expectation were the following, that experienced teachers could indicate this type of competences that novice teachers possess in sufficient extent, or don't, unfortunately, don't possess this type of values. And nobody indicate this type of competences, and maybe it's not important for these experienced teachers.
Questions?
Regarding study number 3, I just very much want to underscore the recognition that it is difficult for beginning teachers, or even teachers who've been in the profession for a long time, to reflect on their own practice and critically also be able to articulate many of the components that are very important to that practice. Sometimes we wonder if it's a lack of meta-language, or in other words, the discourse of the profession, so to speak, or is it just that it is something that they're not very used to doing? And if you would like to comment on that, and perhaps how you may have tried to overcome that in your own program. Thank you.
Thank you. I absolutely agree with you, and we've been doing it for many years, and have the similar observation that it's really difficult to introduce. However, in this program, I should say that number one, it's an MA program, so most of our students are at this point qualified teachers or teachers. So this is in a way their fourth year of becoming teachers. That's one which works for us. The second thing is that the sequence of action research is introduced in the second semester, so in a way they still have time, so it's strategically positioned in the program. So they come to the program, they get used to new placements, they establish relationships with both university and and cooperating teachers, school-based teacher educators, and that's when we start already asking questions. So it's in the second semester they continue with the action research. So we try to build a process and work with where they are, each of them. We also have a very strong tutoring system, so we simply support them and try to persevere despite the difficulty that comes with introducing that to our program.
Do you have questions? If not, then thank you very much.